So you have to put those two things together. It's not my responsibility that it happened to me. It's my responsibility to say, what do I do with that? And how can I turn that into lemonade? That's our responsibility as people. We're not victims.
So today I could not be more excited to be with Chuck Blakeman. And wow, Chuck has an amazing bio. But beyond that, he's just an amazing person and he has some amazing gems for you guys today. So stay tuned. Okay, so Chuck, before I share a little bit about your bio, just thank you so much for joining me today on the Shawn Zajas Show.
I'm excited about being with you, Shawn. This is going to be fun. Put your seatbelts on.
Yeah. So Chuck literally has done like everything in the world of business, from like massively successful entrepreneur, best-selling author, multiple books, TEDx speaker, magazine contributor, Success Magazine, Entrepreneur Inc., New York Times, CNN. Like, you are like the who's who of business influencers, and yet right now in this place, you are actually also serving dentistry.
Yeah.
Which I think is crazy. Me and you met at Vanessa Emerson's expansion this past January.
Right.
And let me say, your story and your speech moved me in such an amazing way. And ever since then, now we are friends. But Chuck, tell me how, I don't know, where do you want to dive off on this?
Well, first, I want to speak to that bio stuff. You know what bios actually are? They're obituaries. They tell you all the good stuff people did in the past, and they never tell you the reality of, hey, this person's actually a human being and they have flaws. And so, yeah, I always get uncomfortable when people read my obituary because it feels like I'm dead. Wait, no, don't read that. So, yeah, we can start anywhere you want. I like having the back porch barbecue talk and just being with a friend and going from where you feel like it needs to go to where it needs to go.
Chuck, I think one of the things that fascinates me, so the reason why I even rebranded away from innovation in dentistry into the Shawn Zajas Show is A, to open up beyond dentistry, but B, I love innovation. And what got me so excited about innovation, Chuck, was never the actual innovation itself. It was always the innovator.
Right.
It was always, well, what led to that breakthrough?
Yeah, what's wrong with this person?
What was it about the individual where they were crazy enough to say, why not me? Why not bet on myself? You have run 13 successful businesses. I would say you bet on yourself. Why is that?
Yeah, well, Shawn, maybe in my early 20s, I read a little book, and the guy made a statement that became my life statement. It's not my life vision. My life vision is to live well by doing good. Just to live out that in my life every day. How can I go out today and do good and live well by doing good? But my life statement is, why do what others can and will do when there's so much to be done that others can't or won't do? Why would I put my hand to something that the world seems to have a good handle on this? We're cranking. But over here, there's something that there's a hole in that, or it's not working the way. So that's the entrepreneur's mindset, which is very different than a business owner mindset. I make a real distinction. Bill Gates was a business owner. Steve Jobs was an entrepreneur. Business owners find something that they're really good at. They do it usually for somebody else first, not always. And then they start their own and they do that the rest of their lives. And they just get better and better and better at that one thing. That's business. That's my version. But entrepreneurs are crazy enough to say, well, there's a hole. I don't understand the hole. I don't understand how to fix the hole. I'm guessing there might be somebody that can help me do that. Let's go fix the hole. And so they jump into stuff they know very little about. And I would say of my 13 businesses that we built in 10 different industries, I probably knew one or two of them well enough to actually start a business. The rest of them, I had no clue what I was doing. But I knew that something was wrong there or something was right there that nobody had discovered. Either way, there was a hole. So why do what others can and will when there's so much to be done that others can't or won't?
I am shocked, Chuck, at the the actual substance of humility that you walk in,
Hmm.
given the accomplishments, given the accolades. And yet it almost seems like the destinations you've reached and the way that you've been so weaponized to be able to bring impact, it almost just seems like it encourages you to serve even more,
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
give even more instead of be expected to be given to or to be served because you're the mighty Chuck Blakeman.
Yeah, no, it's never worked that way for me. Although I will say that most of us will find our strengths. We kind of go around a circle and we start with this thing that is a weakness that becomes over time a strength. And so, for one, there's two of them. I'll talk to yours in a minute. The one you're talking about there that I come across as humble. Well, I also, for the first 20 years of my life, I was a quitter. I was known as the quitter. My mom called me a quitter. My friends called me a quitter. I quit everything. And there was a lot of reasons for that. I was basically abandoned as a kid in some ways. And I lived in the house with my parents, but that was about it. And I've raised myself. And so anytime if you don't get support, you go as far as you can. And when you're 7 years old or 9 years old, if you don't know what else to do, you just quit and you find something else interesting. So my life became a quitter's life. By the time when I was 45 or 50 years old, I had a neighbor at a neighbor party. He said, Chuck, when I think of you, I get the image of a bulldog. You just don't quit. Greatest weakness becomes your greatest strength if you keep punching at it. And I was a really proud, once I had my first success, I really believed that I could hang the world and that nothing was impossible. And so I've gotten beat up and I've bled over this stuff. My first book, I said, this isn't a book I wrote. This is a life I lived. I bled over this stuff. And so, again, I'm really proud on the inside. And eventually over time, I got the edges chipped off of some of that. And then I'm still working on it. And then I'll work on it the rest of my life. Because there's really no reason to be proud of what you've done. It's about the journey. It's not about the acquisition or about the arrival. So great. I did something that helped me or helped somebody else and somebody liked it. I wrote a great book and people like it. Okay, great. Now what? Now what? That's done. That's been. Now what's the next thing I can do? And that's living well by doing good, getting up every morning saying, well, what can I do today that would make the world a better place, that could leave it better than when I found it?
I feel like there's something there about your story of struggle. About the fact that it wasn't like you were Eric Leaf. And if someone doesn't know the reference, it's like the quarterback coming out of
Yeah.
college that was hailed to be the greatest ever.
Golden boy.
Right. And ultimately, the end of the story is he didn't do anything in the
Yeah.
NFL. And contrast that with Tom Brady. And it was interesting as I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking, wow, the only difference between Tom Brady and you in the metaphorical way is that I don't even think you were a 6th-round draft pick. I
No.
think you were a walk-on.
Yeah, barely. I had to climb over the wall to get on the walk-on list.
So it's like his rise to stardom, to fame, was always tethered and anchored to this. People don't know what it took for me to get here, and I'm never going to lose sight of that gold almost that allows me to walk in gratitude, but yet also that chip on my shoulder. And Chuck, you alluded to it, that you pretty much grew up on your own.
Yep.
Can you share just any story, however big or small, that might color that in a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. My whole life, the Home Alone movie has nothing on me. I got left behind so many times it's not funny, and well, it wasn't funny then, but I didn't know any better. I was so alone, Shawn, in this family of 6 people. I was so alone that I did not recognize aloneness until I was probably in my 40s or 50s. I have a very little bit of understanding of why people don't talk about trauma for years to come. I didn't know I was traumatized. I truly thought my sister would talk about her horrible childhood. I would look at her and say, what's wrong with you? I had a great childhood. I could leave the house at 7 in the morning. I didn't have to come back till 9 at night. Nobody had any problem where I was. And, I had this great childhood. I just did whatever I wanted to do. Well, no, actually I didn't. I was in denial. But yeah, so it was just In fifth grade, I asked my mom, I was crying because my older two brothers and my dad had gone on vacation, an epic vacation. We never went on vacation. They went on an epic 2-week vacation from Ohio to the west to see the Grand Canyon and Yosemite and all these incredible places. And I got left behind because I was 2 years younger than my other brother, and it would have just been a bother. And so the boys went, but the boy didn't. And I was sitting in my room crying, and my mom comes up and says, "What are you crying about?" And I just blurted out, "Your body, these things come from your body." And my body I just fumbled and said, I just want you to love me. And she put her hand on her shoulder. She was a nice woman. She put her hand on her shoulder and said, "Well, honey, that's not how you ask." Well, that's just a small cat, and you have to look at other people's journey to appreciate the anger that I could have now that I've learned to work through. I didn't have any anger for the 50 plus years, but also the compassion for where they're coming from. I mean, she grew up in the Depression. She had one dress a year. Santa Claus never came. She was driving a tractor when she was 8 years old and raising 4 other kids. She got no nurturing whatsoever. She didn't know how to do it. And so you have to put those two things together. It's not my responsibility that it happened to me. It's my responsibility to say, what do I do with that? And how can I turn that into lemonade? That's our responsibility as people. We're not victims. We can be victimized. We absolutely can, but we don't live as victims. It's like, okay, why did that happen? What good can come from that? That's really my story over the years. I remember hitchhiking on my way to college the first week. I graduated at the bottom of my class. They made me go to, even though I had a full scholarship in music, they made me go to summer school, and I was hitchhiking the 30 miles to the next town to go to class because it wasn't even a question as to whether my parents would drive me or give me a car to. And I remember in the first day in the car there, I looked around and said, "Well, I don't know. I guess it's on me now." And that was the beginning of me taking responsibility for my life instead of always quitting and always being, in a sense, that victim.
Okay, I was actually just going to ask, where did it come from? Because one of my favorite quotes, and it's this by a real, I don't know, he's a semi-famous intellectual named Os Guinness.
Yeah.
And he says, contrast is the mother of clarity. And growing up, you only show up in your own skin, seeing life through your own eyes, so you don't know any different. There isn't contrast, right?
No.
It's not until all of a sudden you hear other people's stories, other people's experiences, and you're like, that was your normal?
Yeah.
My normal is so far off from that.
Well, to give you an example of that, Shawn, when I finally decided, probably 15 years ago, that therapy sounds interesting, and I didn't even see it as that. I call her my rent-a-friend, my coach. She had me fill out a application, and one of the questions was, name the adult that was most supportive as a child. And you talk about being far from my reality. It was so far where I literally remember looking around my office, this office right here, and nobody in here. I'm just looking around and saying, "That's a thing? Adults are supposed to be supportive of children? Are you kidding me? Wow. Isn't that interesting?" Which is fascinating because I was totally supportive of my kids. I've asked them, so I did it with them. But my reality as a kid was I was so far from being supported that I didn't know it was a thing. My sister, she got support from my aunt, and she got support from a neighbor woman who saw that she was really in a deficit. So she tasted nurturing, and that made her angry. And she grew up angry and frustrated and hurt by her childhood. I wasn't even that close to it to get it. I needed to get angry, hurt, and bitter later and then get over it 30 years later. So yeah, everybody's reality is different. And my story is no better, no worse than anybody else's. Uh, we're all traumatized. Every single one of us lives in a level 4 traumatized environment. And level 4 is basically you can't escape. When you're 5 years old, the lion takes you back to the den and there's 4 other lions and he's going to eat you. That's trauma 4. And level 4 is, well, you're 7 years old and you live in this house and they're doing things very subtly for 20 years or very not so subtly here and there that you can't escape from. So we've all got it. And that was one of the things that I had to come to peace with was, yeah, I was traumatized. And so are you. And so am I. And so is, so.
but Chuck, like, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I know people with significantly less trauma, and yet their story, their own narrative that they dance under and they hang out under is woe is me. Is
Yeah.
my life could have been different
Yep.
if only that didn't happen. Or why did they think they could mistreat me? They should have known better.
Yeah.
And they lose all the power to do anything in their life because someone else's fault that they're not getting to live the dream.
And so this is part of my um, uh, benefit or my gift that I was given. I was given the gift of being so far removed from nurturing that I couldn't look around and say, well, gee, I wish I had some of that. And other people who didn't get it and could look around and see they didn't have it, well, that might make them angry and bitter. I didn't have that when I was young. I grew up literally with two questions in my head. Well, one was a question, one was a statement, and life is built on these two sentences. One is, I can't do that. Well, then you're done. It's over. Of course you can't. Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And I couldn't afford to have that question or that statement. The only thing I could afford to do, because I would have died, I would have just, fallen apart, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. I would have just. So the only question that formed in my head was, how do I do that? How do I do that? I made my own birthday cakes. I bought my own bicycle. I learned how to ride it myself for $5 and spray painted it. And I mean, I put out the Christmas decorations. How do you do that? I don't know. Let's find out. Well, fast forward, why have I built 13 businesses in 10 industries on 4 continents? It's because that was the question that I was gifted with. It's the only thing I could take as a child, as a way of survival, was I got to figure this out because nobody else is going to help me figure it out. And then, of course, that's where quitter came from, because I'd get to the end of my 7-year-old or 9-year-old or 11-year-old rope and just not have any resource to get any farther. And so I'd go find something else to distract me. So it was a gift not having nurturing, and a curse.
Well, and with your gift, you share it so generously, which reminds me to mention even to our listeners that you have shared like a world-class training with anyone that wants to get it. Just contact me. It's for people in the inner circle. That literally is about how dentists can unlock more time to have that dream life, because so many of them are held hostage by their business. But there's something you said. I remember Brian Regan, this comedian, has this skit about what it must have been like for Neil Armstrong, that he's at a dinner party and, there's always the people that are trying to be like, I this, like those me monsters, and how he can just say, I landed on the moon, and it trumps everybody. And in some ways, I feel like you could say, I baked my own birthday cake. Like, how old were you when you learned how to bake your own birthday
I
cake?
think it was 3rd grade was when I first started doing it.
like, so Chuck, I'm sure by now you understand how crazy that is, since you've had kids, to think that a 3rd grader could have the emotional maturity, even the ability to go, oh, it's my birthday. No
Yeah.
one's celebrating
Oh
me.
boy, it's my birthday. So how do I make it? How do I do? I get to have a cake today. I wonder how I do that.
Like
Yeah,
that's a mic drop moment. In 3rd grade, I had to, not I did, I had to bake my own birthday cake.
yeah.
And
I was invisible as a kid, so to the point where I've shared this in other venues, that I show a picture of myself in 5th grade, which was a grade school mandatory, one of those lineup shots at 5th grade. That's the first known photo of me. Is a 5th grade high school or 5th grade school photo. That's the only one. That's the first known photo of me. So, you just assume that everybody's invisible. That's how I treat it. We had 6 people in our family, and they were all invisible to each other. We just kind of figured out how to be what my renter friend came to call the hyper rugged individualist. Not just rugged, hyper.
but,
What else are you gonna do?
I'm just thinking, like, um, with all of these circumstances in your life, you still have all those decision points.
Yeah.
of why did this happen to me? Why
Yeah.
was I without? And at every decision point, somehow you ended up seeing it in a way that made you better, that drew you toward service, that allowed you to not feel ashamed of sharing your gift with the world. And so between the lines, Chuck, my biggest goal with this podcast and with everything I'm recording is that I want every listener that's hearing about the success stories of the influencers that I interview to think like, what desire right now is in my spirit or on my heart or welling up that I just haven't pursued because I'm scared that I'm not ready or I'm not prepared or what could happen if. And my whole thesis is that to the left and to the right of me, there's these amazing individuals like you. We met at an event because you were in the game leading. I got
Mhm.
in the game leading. So we meet, and now all of a sudden I'm taking one of your courses. It's blowing up my world in the best way possible. I'm getting transformed because there can be synergy when two people connect. And yet, if I was playing it safe, if I was talking about how I'm not really ready yet, I could still be on the sidelines thinking about
Yeah.
why I'm not liberated. And yet I know to the left and right of me, Chuck, there's still vacancies where people aren't rising up. They're not stepping up. So my message to them is, why not now? Like, so when it comes to there's no guarantee, when it comes to you might fail, when it comes to the messiness of business, could you speak to that? Because 13 businesses, Um, clearly you have a very healthy relationship with risk, with failure, and the lack of certainty that comes with entrepreneurial ventures.
Yeah, and I think again, my childhood benefited me in that way because I couldn't take any risk as a child that might actually up in me dying because there was no one there to catch me.
Mm.
And I probably learned that when I was, probably 18 months old and fell down some stairs or something. And okay, I got it, figured this out. And so what embedded in me was the concept of managed risk.
Mm.
That that life should be risky. I want every day, the only way we grow, the neurologists tell us the only way we grow is to be making errors constantly. If we're doing something we're good at, there's no growth. So being in your zone or being in your any of those other things, that's when you produce. It's not when you learn anything. So I had to learn that idea of managed risk, and as a result, I only had one business that failed, and it failed utterly, and it was in today's money worth uh, 7+ figures. And I did something foolish and threw a lot of money at something in Africa, which was a goodness play. I wanted to solve poverty in Africa by creating small businesses in Central Africa. And long story short is that there was presidents of countries who wanted to shoot me and other things like that I hadn't planned on. But measured risk is, managed and measured risk is okay. If this fails, what's the worst that could happen? Well, I could lose my house. Okay. Is that something I'm up for? Is that something that I take it to that point? And if my answer is no, then I probably shouldn't take that risk. But if the answer is something less than that, then whatever it is, and I feel like, yeah, okay, that would be really painful. That would suck, but somehow I'd get through it. So yeah, in one of our businesses, we had so many measured risks that we were working with all the time that we got in the habit of saying, well, it doesn't look like any diplomats died in the making of this decision today, so that's a good thing. And we just kept going. So yeah, I think we have to see clearly what we want. It's number one. What do you want? Most of us don't go into business that way. Well, we do, but we have a very short term want. I need to make my mortgage. I want to make my mortgage. That's what I want. I want to pay for next month's bills. And I would suggest to most business owners, my experience when I started helping business owners is they didn't know what they wanted personally 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And that has always driven me. Even when I was in high school, I was thinking, well, I want to be a Beethoven, be the next best composer. And I just always had this idea of leaving something behind that was meaningful. And I found out later that's very weird. That's not normal. But I also think that it's really helpful. And the people who catch that, we call it the big why. What's the big why that's already in you? You don't have to go find it, it's already in there. You just have to give yourself permission to let it out. Go ask some other people, hey, what impact do you think I have in your lives? Why do you hang around me? Things like that. And you'll find your big why. And once we have our big why, then that creates the ability to take measured risks because you're always looking at the long game and never at how do I make my mortgage? It's like, well, of course I have to make my mortgage now. Now that I have this long game, that just becomes a thing it's no longer a big issue. It's like I got to get way past that. So yeah, some guy has talked about 10xing your business, which has some issues with it itself. But I like the idea of thinking big because then today's decisions and tomorrow's opportunities and a month long of stuff just doesn't seem to have as much scariness to it.
I love that. So I can't get this out of my head where I keep thinking. I remember there was some entrepreneur that was giving advice about hiring, and you'll see how this ties in. And on the resume, it'll say like 10 years of experience doing this. And one of the questions he said you need to ask is, does this individual really have 10 years of experience, or did they experience the same year 10 times?
Yeah.
And I mean, the irony is you could say, did they experience the same month 120 times?
Yes.
And yet you have so much experience based off of the continents, based off of the 13 businesses, based off of the author, speaker, entrepreneur, even in your life, crammed in there, that I feel like you are like the innovator and influencer's mentor. Like you are positioned perfectly to be the one that comes alongside, supports, and elevates the biggest influencers in the industry because you've already done it, Chuck. You've
Yeah.
already done it. Like I don't know, maybe your 3 to 5 is the community where you're doing that. But if not, I would say get a community. I will start waving the flag and say, hey, if you want to impact dentistry in a big way, this is who you need to sit under because you have such wisdom, such expertise, but then you also have the heart to be able to deliver it in such a way where you genuinely care about your students learning it because it's real to you. You struggled, you fell down, you bled in the trenches.
Yeah. The greatest coaches are not the greatest players generally.
Mm.
Generally, great players don't coach well, and you have to ask why. And the simple, maybe not the whole answer, but the simple answer is because they came by it too easily. They were so gifted that they really, in some ways, don't know what they're doing. And even if they know what they're doing, they don't know how to teach it because they never had to learn it in the trenches and bleed over every step. And I think that's what makes me a good coach and a good mentor of other people because I'm not Richard Branson. I know he bled as well, so I don't want to demean his thing as well. But there are, the Steve Jobs and these all these superstars that either were in the right place at the right time or they were just so talented that they could pull these things off and hardly even look back. And I've bled over every inch of it to get where I am. And so yeah, when you learn from experience, it's a whole different thing. There's two kinds of knowledge. There's gnosis, which is knowledge of the head, and there's epignosis, which is knowledge of the life.
Mm.
And I couldn't read books for years. I was ADHD and dyslexic, and I had some medical therapy that actually turned me back on. But I couldn't read, even though I was writing. I would read like one book a year. But head knowledge, I just couldn't. It never worked for me. So I had to go with, well, what feels good, what feels right in my body, what intuition am I working from today, and let's go with that. That's the best I've got.
So Chuck, like I think this is so helpful. Typically, I don't like interviewing people that I already know even a little bit about because then I don't have beginner's brain when I'm in the interview.
That's good.
Well, A, I heard you speak. B, I've now worked under you with your course. And one of the things I just have to say is that I am obsessed, like intellectually, with filing everything in the most appropriate way. So if I read a book and I feel like it's all over the place, it doesn't have good structure, or even their concepts, they're just kind of like thrown out at a whim, but they're not really tested. It drives me crazy. Like I'm arguing with the author
You
in
can
my head.
smell it, can't you?
I can't handle it.
Yeah.
And here with you, you've already even shared frameworks with me that if anything unlock what I've been looking for, but they finally put organization to what I was unable to organize on my own.
Mm.
And I'm not like, there's no hyperbole here. Like, this is serious. Like 100%. It is so rare for me to find somebody that has that ability that I can just 100% honor and say, like, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your books. Thank you for the way that you lead. Thank you for not giving up when it got hard. And that's actually where I want to go right now. Tell me, bring me to a place when darkness was dark in your professional life,
Yeah.
where it was either a season and you weren't really sure you were going to get through it. I just want to know, did you ever experience something like that? Can you think of a time?
Yeah, there's multiple of those. There's fortunately there's not dozens of them. There's a few, and they stand out very clearly for me. And I remember being at a place where I'd spent uh, a lot of money on 3 or 4 different people to scale one of my businesses, and they had failed miserably at it, and I had not taken my own advice and Peter Drucker's advice to hire slowly and fire fast, because I loved these people and wanted the best for them, and basically got used for 4 or 5 years
Mm.
in very slow, steady burn, like the frog in the frying pan. You don't know that it's happening until it happens, and then yeah, we finally had to put these people out on the market and have them get where they needed to be, which worked out for them. But I remember standing with my wife in the kitchen, and I was just crying. And she said, "Well, it was like a moment with my mom, only with a better response." And she said, "What are you crying about?" I said, "For the first time in my life, I don't know if we're going to make it. I don't have any confidence that what I'm doing makes any sense at all. I'm lost today." And that was a real tough thing to come to for a rugged individualist, a hyper rugged individualist. Is, yeah, I don't have an answer for this, and I'm not sure there is one. That's the scary part, because I'm always finding, if there is an answer out there, I'll find it. How do I do that? But that was probably the lowest moment of my professional life, was coming to that place where I thought, oh no, I'm in deep trouble.
So what did you get liberated from that you didn't know maybe was still holding you back in that moment or in the moments that followed that?
Yeah, so you have to take the long view again and ask yourself, okay, so right now it doesn't feel like there's an answer to this. Is there any one thing? What can I do? Is there any one thing that I can do? And today, is there one thing I can do to continue to move forward in some small way? And literally in the days that followed that, it was well, I think the first thing I probably should do is get up. Okay, I'll do that. All right, well, look at that victory. and then well, I need to talk to so and so, and maybe I can email this guy, and should I call that person, and maybe this person can have some advice for me, and so it was really, how do you eat the elephant? Well, I was being stomped by an elephant, and while I'm being stomped, I have to pick off little pieces of the elephant and eat it. And so that's the simple, almost snarky, but real answer is, I just had to figure out what is the next one thing I could do. And ever since then, when I do courses and seminars and workshops and that kind of stuff, my handout at the end, it always says, the end of it is the next one thing. What's the next one thing that you can do to move yourself forward? Because it's not about giant leaps. It never is. It's always about the little things that happen one at a time. Uh, I took a URL out for a book I have never written, but the book is called Gradually, Then Suddenly, and it's from I think it's Ernest Hemingway who wrote the book The Sun Also Rises. Might have the author wrong, I don't. But I was reading that book a little bit, and there was these two guys, business guys, talking. And one guy said, "So tell me, John, how'd you go bankrupt?" And he hangs his head and says, "Well, 2 ways: gradually, then suddenly. And I thought about that in the positive because I always want to look at, well, how can I learn from this? And I thought, well, how do people really, truly, honestly, and with the rare exceptions of winning the lottery freak shows, how do people become successful? Two ways. Gradually, then suddenly. And nobody sees the gradual. The Beatles played in a German dive like 7 hours a day, six or 7 days a week for 3 years before anybody found out who they were. And on and on and on. And almost all of the overnight successes, if you look back, you realize, they got the crap beat out of them and they got up and they did it again. And so, what's the next one thing? Like Churchill, I think, said, a leader is somebody who gets up one more time than they get knocked down. And that's really what I had to do. And you don't try, and in some cases, you still know that you want to live well by doing good. And you know what the long game looks like that way. But you don't know what the next 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months looks like to get there. But you do know, well, I can get up today. I can get out of bed and I can go call, I can talk to somebody. What's the next one thing? And from that, it grows into other things. I have a motto I use all the time as a result of all these things I've bled over. This one is, planning doesn't create movement. Movement creates the plan. And I found that to be true throughout life. That, how did when did Lewis and Clark get their maps? When they were done. Every day after they moved, they could draw a map of it. Before that, they had almost nothing. And welcome to business.
Okay, so first of all, you said in that dark moment when you were coming out, it's funny because the takeaway that you learned from it was different from even the takeaway I heard. As you were saying it, you said something like, I got up and I was like, well, that's a win. The fact that you said, well, that's a win. Later on, you heard the gradual, then suddenly, and you said to yourself, what can I find that's positive from that?
Yeah.
And it's like, Chuck, that's this inner wiring that, again, call it a gift from your struggles.
How do I do that?
The fact that you even though talk positively to yourself.
Yeah.
You don't know how many times and seasons I would be in front of the mirror looking into my own eyes, and all I would be doing would be reflecting on the ways in which I felt I failed myself, the ways in which I wasn't enough, the ways in which I wasn't perfect.
Yes.
And I would be so ready to almost beat myself down, like, come on, Shawn, you're better than that. And I wouldn't tell myself the story of where there was those budding virtues, where there was the little bits of fruit that I could look at and celebrate. Instead, it's like, well, you're not Zuckerberg yet. What the heck's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is that wasn't my childhood, right? Like, I didn't hear. So here I was given support. I was given love. I was given belief, but I still had to figure out how to love and believe in myself.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those beautiful things about life. I said this early on. I'm not responsible for what happened to me. I am responsible for how I respond to it. So one of those other little nuggets, I have, 15 or 20 of these things I live my life by. One is, circumstances don't make me who I am. How I respond to them does. That's what makes me who I am. So I could wallow in, well, the world outside made me into something. My parents, my brother, whatever it was, all these things that happened to me as a kid. And ever since then, the economy, COVID, all these things happened to me. No, they happened for me. And okay, yeah, I wouldn't want it again, and I wouldn't want it then, and I don't want it again. And okay, but why did it happen? Well, there was something in there that allowed me to become stronger. If we work out, we only get stronger if we hurt. And we shouldn't look at the hurt and say, that hurts. I don't want to do that. No, recognize the hurt, embrace it, and lean into it, because it's the hurt that's going to get you there. So we're not made to struggle, but we are made for the struggle. And when people unpack that and think about it deeply enough, it's going to be a lot of fun in their lives. I'm not made to struggle. I am made for the struggle.
I think so many times people look around and they start seeing ashes from their past or in their present circumstances. And somehow they identify, well, that means there's something dead in me
Yeah.
or about me, instead of realizing, like the phoenix, it's an opportunity for you to arise out of the ashes in the most brilliant of ways. Because I always feel like that place of ash, almost like um, the valley sets you up to be able to climb the mountain. You can't just go from peak to peak to peak. Now, you can get off the treadmill and stop going from peak to valley, peak to valley. That's a message of yours.
Yeah.
But just this idea that, like, if there's someone listening right now and they're surrounded by what would seem like devastation, or there's pain, or there's hurt, I challenge them to find where there's that beauty, where there's that gold that can allow them to shift the narrative so they can emerge from those ashes and shine. And I really believe everyone is meant to shine, Chuck. And one of the most liberating things that you believe in, that I feel like you empower other people, is what you just said about Lewis and Clark. They got the map after.
Yeah.
So right now you have maybe dental professionals, and imagine a successful dentist, and they already have a practice. They don't know how, like, dentistry, I feel like there's such a demand for it because all of us have teeth and we don't always know how to take care of them, that sometimes dentists can rise to success simply because the market allows for it. And I don't mean to be dismissive about them, but what I'm trying to say is that if then all of a sudden another desire emerges that's in them, they're almost scared. Well, I already have fame. I already have respect. I already have visible
Yeah.
success. What if I look foolish stepping out into this new thing? What if I don't have the certainty and all the pieces around? And just like you're saying, and just like my hat, pioneer positive disruption. The essence of pioneering is you go somewhere where there's not a path. There's not a
Yeah.
road before. Like, you don't figure out the map ahead of time.
No.
It only comes into view when you look back.
Yeah, it's so true. The Greeks would say things like we think we think our way to a new way of acting. They were very cognitive, very headstrong, and the Romans were more no, no, that's not accurate. We act our way to a new way of thinking, and they were more about moving and getting things done. And both of them had their, but I really believe that nothing in life supports the idea that we think our way to a new way of acting. That is a educational um, lie, if I can be so strong, that when we fill our heads with all kinds of stuff and we get A's, we'll actually be, something will change. How do you learn to ride a bike? Reading books will not help you get there. The only way to learn how to ride a bike, learn some basic cognitive things about a bike. But the only way you're going to learn how to ride a bike is to get on it and start riding. And we act our way to a new way of not just thinking, but in being. And when you get off the bike, every one of us was changed and neurologically different people because we went ahead and acted on something. It's people say that I'm counterintuitive. I'm not. I'm counter logical, because so much of what I do doesn't make sense in the brain, but it makes total sense in the body and in life. And that's a very intuitive thing to understand, that we're not going to know what it means to ride a bike until we rode one. And by the way, we can't tell somebody else what it means when we're done, because it's in our body. The words won't quite describe it. It's
Well,
the same thing. I always wanted to build a bumper sticker off of the Jeep bumper sticker that says, "It's a Jeep thing. You wouldn't understand." Well, it's kind of like, well, this is a business owner thing. You wouldn't understand, because business owners, you're viscerally, cognitively, brain-wise, everything somatically, you're different. Your nervous system is different, and everybody's is based on your experience. We're all snowflakes, not flakes.
Well, I love that you were almost thinking that saying that they sold us a lie and saying almost that was heavy. I would go like 10 times further than that. They sold us a fantasy that somehow we can stay in the land of theory.
Yeah,
We can stay in the academic realm of preparation and business plans and research to make sure everything's going to be this perfectly linear, executed, well-oiled plan. And it's just a bunch of crap. I stayed in the business room for 5 years, Chuck, in
yeah,
the land of theory. And you know what I got? I pretty much have the regret of missing out on 5 years of my life of what the marketplace could have told me. Some of
Yeah.
those business ideas, they could have been great. But you know what? I never found out because I never let the market say, just change this. It's pretty good, but just the market tells you what's good and what's bad. That's where true learning happens when you actually launch.
Yeah. Yeah. I made this offer to kind of universally on a podcast maybe 10 years ago. And somebody actually took me up on it. I said, if you're planning on spending $120,000 for 2 years to get an MBA, just I'll, I'll do it for 80. Just come live near me, or 60, and you can use the other 60 to live on. And you can spend 2 years with me and or with somebody, just with our business, and you'll learn way more than you would from an MBA because yeah, MBAs are good if you want to be president of some giant corporation. Other than that, they're actually a really bad idea. So yeah, don't get me started on the education system. It's fraud at a higher level.
So, Chuck, you need to teach us two words that are not well known. Now, no, seriously, I'm the guy that if I somehow had an affiliate relationship with Costco over the last 20 years, I would probably be rich because I really do tell people what I believe in. And most people that start a family and they're trying to do it in a savvy, economical way, I'm like, hey, Costco is the best place to go. Like it makes sense, you know? Um, and yet, in conversation over the last 2 months, you don't know how many people I've introduced these two new words to. And that's the way I tell them about my new friend, Chuck Blakeman, and just the all that I have. So just take it away and share these words.
Yeah, I was probably 15, 20 years ago, I was reading a book called Self-Made in America by John McCormick. It's not even in print anymore. And it's not a motivational book, but it's the only motivational book I'll recommend because it wasn't written by a motivational guru. It was written by a guy who was trying to put hair salons in Texas malls in the 1970s. And putting a service organization in a mall in the 70s was suicide. You're not selling anything. You're going to give people haircuts. He went to 163 banks, 263 banks, and called his wife, who was still running the hair salon in New York, and said, honey, every one of these banks wants me to open a Tex-Mex restaurant, which was all the rage in the 70s. And he said, I think I'll just open a Tex-Mex restaurant. They'll throw money at me. And she said, okay, whatever you want to do. But I just read the story of Walt Disney. And Walt Disney went to 303 banks to put his idea in front of them of this stupid idea of having an amusement park in downtown Anaheim, California. And this 304th bank finally funded it. And he said, okay, I'll go to 304. And the next day he went to his 264th or 265th bank, and that bank funded his dream. And he ended up having 15 or 20 different hair salons in 15 or 20 different malls that all netted him $300,000 each every year. And the point of that rant is this: I found in that book this funny word, conation. It's the most important business word I had never heard. And he has a whole chapter on to conate, on what it means to conate. Couldn't even pronounce it. And his definition is basically the will to succeed that manifests itself in single-minded pursuit of a goal. My slang definition is I want something so bad I'm already doing it. That's conation. And you see that the number one indicator of early stage success is speed of execution in a business. That's data has shown that. Get moving. Don't try and draw the map. Draw the map as you go. It's uncomfortable, but you'll actually run into less stuff if you draw the map as you go than if you try and draw it beforehand and follow your map that was drawn beforehand. So I found that word there. And then a couple of years later, I don't know how I even got this little book. It's like a book of obscure words in the English language. and I was leafing through it, and yep, sure enough, there's conation because it's really obscure. And I just kind of fanned to the back, and I saw the word conation in the back as I was fanning. It took me like 5 or 10 minutes to find that word again in the back of the book, because what's a word? What's C doing in the V's? Basically, I knew it was in the V's, and I found conation, and it was with this other word, and I couldn't pronounce it at the time. It's velayity, to be valacious. What in the world is that? Well, most dictionaries never tell you the antonym. You have to figure it out. It doesn't say it, but in the dictionary definition of go, the antonym to go is stop. It doesn't say that. We have to figure that out. Here in this one, it said velayity, the antonym to conation. They're beating me over the head with it. I thought, okay, I'm interested. I'm in. And the dictionary definition of velayity, I'll give you conation again so you can contrast the two and see why that's the second most powerful word you've never heard. So conation is I want something so bad, I'm already doing it. Velayity, the dictionary definition is the true desire with no intention of doing anything. Wouldn't it be great if someday I sure hope that it's all velayity. Get moving. Dreamers talk, visionaries walk. Dreamers are valacious, and visionaries are conative.
And I feel like there's something. So as you were saying that, I was getting this, because for so long I feel like I've been valacious, and just to defend anyone out there that might feel guilty of that,
Yeah.
I think there's something there where, if we look at an exponential curve, I feel like the first 30 to 50, maybe even 60% of clarity on an idea comes to me fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I can kind of get some idea of what it is, but the last 15 to 20% is this crazy curve that takes 5, 10, 15 times as long to get clarity on. And I feel like a lot of people that might be cautious or have a cautious disposition think that the right thing to do, the wise thing to do, the respectable and whatever principle thing to do would be to wait until you have that 90-95% certainty before doing something. Because, therefore my wife won't feel so bad because I have a plan. And maybe valaciousness sometimes is just because we don't know we have the permission to actually move when we have 50%, when we have 70%.
You're right, Shawn. Even with 20 or 80%, my parents did model to me that you shouldn't take risks, and the school system modeled that, and life models that, and our COVID experience modeled that, and everything we do. And it's understandable that we don't want to take stupid risks, but the MBA, the SBA, and all the other A's, they all tell you to don't do anything till you have it figured out. There's a scientific principle called the precautionary principle. Look it up on Google. And the precautionary principle basically says,
does it have my picture attached to it?
it could, but it says basically is unless you have a contingency for every bad thing you could think could happen, don't move. Now that may be good for putting somebody on the moon, although the moonshots were off by 99.9% of the time, even with that. But it certainly is not a good way to live a business, and it's a terrible way to live a life. Because people who live safe don't have a story to tell. And nobody ever lived a great life in balance. They lived it in integration. Sometimes I was completely out of balance I refused to do this incredible opportunity 25 years ago because my kids were in a place where it wouldn't have made sense to move them. I was totally out of balance with them. And then other times we need to figure out how to live that life that allows us to be integrated in that way.
I absolutely love that. Like, I feel like I just got so set free, even though I've known about these two words. For some reason, I was feeling slightly condemned, thinking, man, I'm really good at velayity. I'm really bad at conation. When the reality is, I think I was ready to conate, but I never gave myself permission to actually just start moving. And the crazy thing is, like you're saying, the second I start moving with the 30%, the 50%, the 70%, it's amazing how everything seems to open up, everything seems to align, and I know what to do, like even if it's just the next best step, like you're saying, but it becomes into view, and it never would have come into view. It's almost like I'm in the harbor and there's a fog, but the fog is only like a quarter of a mile thick, and I wonder why I can't see the open seas, so I just keep waiting. But it's almost like life is going to keep the fog there to test you. If you want it bad enough, you'll set sail without having perfect visibility.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the perfect message to our listeners today. It's like, you don't need perfect clarity. You don't need perfect visibility. And stop telling yourself, well, I must not just be entrepreneurial, or I must not be like everyone else because maybe I'm scared and that's why I'm not starting it. You're probably not scared. You just think, because you believe that fantasy, that you need to have 100% certainty before you move. And that's just not true.
No, it's antithetical to actually being successful at life and doing anything. Again, it goes back to what neurology teaches us. We learn by mistakes. We do not learn by having things figured out. You want to learn how to figure out something? Do it. And then ask yourself, well, that was fascinating. How'd that happen? What do I need to change? What worked and how do I hold on to that? What didn't work and how do I replace that? So there's no mistakes. There's no victories. There's no defeats. There's just seminars. Life is a seminar. That's fascinating. I don't like that, but I'm fascinated about it. How do I make sure that doesn't happen again? It's just a seminar. And there's 2 rules of seminars. We can maybe, if you want to close it up with this, but there's 2 rules to seminars. Rule number 1 is go to the cheapest, shortest seminar you possibly can. My Africa seminar was like 4 years long and cost me a lot of money. Rule number 2 is try not to repeat a seminar. Learn enough by going to the first seminar that you don't have to repeat the seminar. So life is just fascinating.
Okay, so I do have one question. My closing question is this. So Chuck of today is walking down the street, and in the distance, you see a younger version of Chuck. You can say 10 years old, you can say 18 years old, maybe 20, right when you went to, not hijacked, you, what's it called where you got to college?
I thumbed my way to college, yeah.
Yes. So you're seeing him off in the distance, and you have only one moment to communicate a brief sentiment to him. What do you share?
Chuck, I am so proud of you. I cannot believe what you've done to get where you are and the survival strategies that you've put in place and what you've done with your life to this place. It's amazing. I can't wait to see what you do with yourself.
Wow.
And I wish every kid who is 5 years old would hear that, no matter what circumstance they find themselves in. Man, because all of it's just a survival strategy. Everything I put in place from baking cakes to, it was just survival strategies. Like, good for you, man. All that stuff that gave you all the crazy, dumb things that you do today, well, they were survival mechanisms that you had as a kid. And learn from them, embrace them. Don't throw them out. Learn from them, embrace them, bring them in close, and learn how to use them to get where you need to be.
Okay, so someone's listening right now and they're like, I need to meet this guy. I need to talk to him. I need to hire him. I want him to speak for me, whatever. How do they get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to chuckblakeman.com and try and make that easy. Or I have an email, chuckblakeman@gmail.com. Or no, I'm sorry, Chuck Blakeman at Crankset Group. Thank you for that. I just remembered Crankset Group, CRANKSET, like a bicycle, cranksetgroup.com. They can get a hold of us, or they can try grow at cranksetgroup.com. Any one of those 3 methods. And feel free to reach out and let's see what the journey looks like.
Chuck, it has been an honor, and it has been so easy just getting to honor you as an innovator, as an influencer, as someone that's using your gifts, as someone that's using your light to make massive impact, not just in dentistry. But thank you so much, and thank you for letting me interview you today.
My privilege. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm honored to be part of what you're doing, and I look forward to seeing how you continue to impact people's lives with this podcast. Keep going.